Oops, I did not mean to stop sharing my screen. Hello guys, welcome to Preprocessing 2. Hope everyone has had a nice project. How'd you guys like this one? Thumbs up or thumbs down in chat if you liked building the resume. I think that project's kind of fun, so. Cool. Glad people are liking less so far, at least. Yeah, and of course, Stephen, like, it'll always be pretty in flux, right? Because we're all still learning as we go. So you'll always be adding more stuff and improving your styling, or whatever you want to do to it. So it's not really done, but it's a work in progress, which is what's important. Because yeah, learn every day, and you're gonna be fine. yeah, I definitely get that. So to kind of add on a little bit as to the previous lecture, we're learning a few more things today. Nothing really too crazy. So at the end of the module, you should be able to create parametric mixins, use functions, and incorporate escaping, create a master less file, and use importing to create a project. So the really important things are actually setting up your less structure properly and the parametric mixins. Escaping is nice, but it's like a pretty niche thing. You don't really do it too much. Functions, like, you can use them. They're cool, but they're kind of like added, like, extra stuff. The really important stuff is making sure that you have your structure set up really nice. And today I have a note in my notes that says, today's project is a great preparation for the sprint challenge. So keep that in mind. So tonight's challenge, I think, is just build another website, basically just with less this time. So this will be a good thing to get you set up for the sprint challenge this week. Cool. Sorry, by the way, if you guys hear like loud rain sound, but my desk is right next to the window and it's like pouring out right now, so I can't really do anything about that. So hopefully it chills out a little bit. Cool. All right, so I'm going to review first a little bit. Okay, I forgot to fork this actually. Let me fork. That would have been bad if I started coding in there and I had forgotten to fork. BT8. Cool. So I'm going to just do a little bit of review first. This is the starter. Okay. So we've got our mixins right here. So can anyone remember what like the purpose of a mixin is? Like, why might you use a mixin? What are some good examples of using a mixin for? Dry. Nice. Yep. Good stuff. Save colors and other variables. Yeah, you can use variables in mixins. Built-in rules for centering. That's a good example. So like this one here, display flex and just center. Reuse code, scalability. Yeah, exactly. So basically we use mixins for kind of like general patterns of styling that we are probably going to reuse a lot, right? So we've got this bordered one, which is just this this kind of nice border above the content sections. We've got this centering one, which just centers it. So these are things that we might use across the whole app, right? So if I had these multiple pages or whatever, I could reasonably assume that I'm probably going to use these mixins on all the pages. And that's important too, right? We don't want to make mixins for everything. if you're only using a mixin like once or twice, then consider if you needed to use a mixin at all. If you're like copy pasting the same chunk of code like 5 or 6 times, though, maybe it's time to just turn that into a mixin, right? Oh, one thing I forgot to mention last night, someone mentioned that you don't need the paren, and that's correct. You could just not have the paren, but then it's basically just a class, right? So like if we take the paren away, it's a class. And the main difference, let me turn that setting off, I hate that. The main difference between it just being a class and being an actual mixin is if we look at the compiled code, while it's a mixin, if we look at our compiled CSS, if I can actually remember where we put it. So bordered and centered. Border. Border, border, border. Yeah. One sec. So in sorry, my phone was ringing. Shut it off. So with the paren, mixins don't actually compile, right? So that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm like, I had a point here. So like basically in they are right, okay. I remember what I was gonna say. Sorry. Total like brain loss right there. So in here, there we don't actually see like the border mixin anywhere, right? Like there's no border mixin. It's just all distributed throughout wherever we've applied it. However, if we take away the paren and then we save it and run it and then view again, we actually have this bordered class that shows up. So that might not seem like super important to you, but it actually is in terms of like specificity, like making sure things are the way that you expect them to be, basically. We don't want this to compile as a class because it can just cause some weird behavior. So that's the reason that we have the paren there. To clarify a little bit from last night, because someone asked me that and I forgot to mention that it compiles as well, but it's also nice just to like know that it's a mixin, right? Having that like actual visual indicator. Cool. But remember though that you don't have to actually call it when you don't have to actually use the paren when you're calling it in the code, right? So if I find wherever I called it in here, bordered, we don't have to have the paren like this. We can, it's optional, but we don't have to. So good tip there. We aren't going to see it in the compiled CSS because it's already been translated to what we define in the mixin, right? Yeah, exactly. So like the compiler basically sees the paren and is like, okay, this is a mixin, so we're not going to compile it as a class. We're going to just add these things to whatever classes that it's been linked in. Yeah. That's a good point too, Nick. We're going to learn about parametric mixins in a couple minutes. So you actually, the paren make a lot more sense when you see what parametric mixins are. Cool. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started a little bit. Unless anyone has any questions about review topics from last night that they were fuzzy on, that they want me to go over first. Is it considered best practice to include the paren when calling the mixin? I'm not sure that it's like I'm not sure if there's a best practice recommendation for when it's being called. You don't have to unless it's a parametric mixin. It might make sense for you to put the paren there at all times just so that things are uniform. But I'm not sure that I've seen like a specific recommendation on that. Cool. Feel free to, let me read what Michael just posted. Curious though, I used a class called Flex that only does one thing, display flex. I like it because it can define so many CSS options right from HTML. Can I essentially apply any other class properties as if it were a mixin regardless of it explicitly being a mixin? What do you mean by class properties? Like if when we define a class, you mean like just like the stuff inside of a class right now, just any random class? Like, yeah, you could totally do that, right? Like you could just make a class that you reuse everywhere, and that's honestly fairly common for people that don't know about mixins. Like they'll just make a class and use it to style stuff like that, like a mixin without actually using a mixin. So you can do that. But why if you have the mixin, right? Because with the mixin, it just compiles nicer. One other thing too, before I actually get into it, I'm going to try to be a little more organized about answering questions tonight. So if I don't immediately answer your question, don't get like too upset, please. I'll go through and answer questions in chunks instead of just answering them ad hoc. So it would be super helpful if you do the red question mark emoji in front of your questions so that I can find them scrolling through, and try not to like spam too much stuff in the lecture channel would be great. I think there are like some chat channels that you guys can use if you want to just like talk about random stuff. But I don't want to miss any questions. Yeah, Joe brings up a good point. Make sure that you're using the thread capability. So with that, let's actually get into some coding. So tonight, well, first of all, let me see. Buttons. Okay. So I'm going to, oops. Cool. Okay, fun. So let me add just like a dummy class on here. Class equals center, and then I'll literally just like make like a center class. Like this is silly, but I'll do this for now. So if I save this and run it, now our button is centered and it looks really nice. So this is cool, but what if we wanted to do something slightly different with our button, right? Like what if we wanted to, what if we like this book a flight button as it is, but what if we want to make another button like buy the stuff, and we want it to look slightly different? Like what if we wanted it to be a little bit smaller, maybe a different color, but having most of the same attributes as the book a flight button? So this is actually where parametric mixins start coming in. Oh, I think I was supposed to use this one. So this is where parametric mixins start coming in. And this is kind of where a lot of those programming basics are going to start being a little more evident, like the variables that we introduced the other night, functions and parameters and arguments and stuff like that. So this is the syntax for a parametric mixin. We see these at signs with, you know, a letter after them. I really hate this convention where we just have like a letter for our name. So these are just variables, right? So I'm gonna actually write these out just to make this a little more clear. The important thing about this is that these have to match. So you can name your variables whatever you want. Like these are totally arbitrary names. They could be named like stuff and things or like whatever, or color names, or named after like a property. Like right now we name them after like justify content and align items, but they could be called content or items or whatever else is the main point. The only important thing is they have to match up. So when they're in here, they're called parameters. Can anyone tell me what the difference is between a parameter and an argument? Argument is the value of a parameter. Yeah, sort of. Parameters are in the function. Arguments are passed when called. Exactly. Yeah. Great, Remington. So like I said right here, these are parameters. It might be simpler to think of it as parameters are just kind of placeholders. Like variables are placeholders, right? So parameters are just placeholders for a value. Arguments are the actual value. So when we go into actually calling our parametric mixin, it is basically it's going to be asking for values for these. So we've got these two justify and align variables in here as the parameters. So we have to give it two values in here when we're calling it. Sorry. So they can be anything, right? Like I could give this any value if I wanted to. Like I could say like blue or like you know, red or whatever if I wanted to. However, this isn't going to compile. And the reason that is because red and blue are not values that work for justified content. So if I run it, it's probably going to break. I'm not sure what way it's going to break, but yeah, so it just basically doesn't apply anything, right? So I wonder if it gives an error. It does not. Okay. Yep. So basically, it just doesn't apply these traits, right? Because those are not actual values that you can give to justify or align. Gosh, excuse me. So we can do something like what's a use for justify? Me justify content. Okay, yeah, I'll use center. Use center. Let's do like center and center. So now it works because we've given it an actual value, right? I could do, I could add another thing in here. I could do flex direction, and then rename this direction and put at direction. What do you guys think will happen if I don't put another value in here though? Ignore it. Let's see what happens. So yep, it did ignore it. So we can put column in here just to see that it will do some stuff, right? Cool. So, so we've proven that we can put values in to match up with these parameters. So these are the arguments, these are the parameters. The important thing to remember with this is that order is really important. So if I were to just drop in a random order, like if I put column first, and I'll actually change one of these so that you know, it's a little different. Justify content. I'll do space between. Space between. So if I run this where they're in a different order than they are for the parameters, then it breaks. We're not actually, I don't think any of these are actually applying. Let me double check. So if we look in the elements list here, we get, yeah, like none of these end up applying. These are the default styles from the browser. When it says user agent style sheet, that means it's the default styles from the browser. And then these are the class there, the dot center. Yeah, so so none of them are actually getting applied because it's breaking on that first one. So because we've put column in for the first value, column is not a value that can be used for justify content. So the whole thing just breaks right here, basically. Like it gets to this line and it's like, okay, that doesn't work. I'm going to stop now. So it doesn't even hit these other two. So that's the real important thing with parameters and arguments, is making sure that you have them in the same order everywhere. So you have to have the same names when you're plugging something into the code. So they have to be named the same as the parameter. And then you have to actually have them in the right order. So if I change this over back to space between center and column, now that looks better, right? Cool. So we can get even more exciting with this stuff. What if we what if we do like, what if we have like a typo and we forget to spell justify right? If it doesn't match up, it's weird. If it doesn't match up, it's still, let's see, justify content space between. Weird, that should not be working. Did I save it? Main content, flex direction column. Yeah. Oops, inspect. There we go. Cool. So yeah, that is strange. I'm not sure why that's showing up, but it should not be showing up. These have to match. My only guess could be that CodePen is potentially like somehow helping us out there. Like it sees that we're like one letter off or something. That seems really weird though. I'm not sure what's up with that. So I'm gonna write a note to see what's up with that, because they do have to match. Yeah, maybe I can refresh. It's not a bad idea. What is up with that? Oh, okay, yeah. So this is actually what happens when you have an error in your less. It just like the compiler breaks. So like your entire thing just gets busted. And that's with this typo. So if I put this back in, Now it's back. I don't know why I have to refresh CodePen for stuff like that to take effect. Just CodePen things, I guess. It will be instantaneous in Visual Studio, or VS Code rather. So like if you make a typo or something like this or whatever, your whole thing is just going to stop working. So it'll be really obvious when you make a mistake like that. Yeah, so that's what happens if you make a typo and you don't line these up properly, or you give it a value. So let me do this again. So if I give it a value that doesn't match, it should break as well. Flex direction. Center. Yeah, I guess it doesn't break when you give it a value that doesn't work like that, but it does if you have mismatched variables. So that's good to know. Yeah, so just make sure that you're placing stuff in the proper order and you're matching names. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble. So this is our first parametric mixin right here. So again, parametric mixins are just mixins that have parameters in here. That's like the only add-on for this, right? And I'll be frank with you, you'll probably use parametric mixins pretty rarely, because the use cases are less frequent, right? Like when are, the example that I use with buttons is probably the most common one that you'll see, because you might have like 5 or 6, similar buttons that you use around your website. But most of the time, if you have something that's going to look pretty similar, a regular mixin will probably do the job, because you're gonna want like uniformity in your styles in some way, right? Yeah, this is basically a good intro to some of like the simple JavaScript stuff that we're going to get into next week. So fun stuff. So let's actually, I don't know if I want you guys to do a challenge for this right now or after one more example. Do you guys want to see one more example of this and then try to make your own, or do you want to try to make your own right now? Okay. So I'll do one more example then. We're going to actually do the button. So we're going to turn this big old class into a button, or into a parametric mixin, rather. So mixins go at the top of your CSS code. So tonight we're going to learn how to split your less files out. So that'll be less of a concern earlier tonight. Cool. Okay, so let me do, so again, we're basically just going to turn this into a parametric mixin so we can make these buttons have slightly different styles. I want to call it, I guess, button p mixin. So I'll grab all this. I'll leave the media queries out for now, but do those later. So I guess probably some of the values that I'll care about are BG color, cursor, at width, at height, at border radius. So these are the ones that we're gonna have some power over. So remember, we'll just take these values and drop them into place inside of the properties. Width, height, and border radius. Okay, so the way that we'll actually plug this in now is we will get rid of the code in here and just drop button P mixin in. So this book flight button, do book flight button 1 and book flight button 2. Button 2. All right, so I want the first one to be a pink background with a, I think pointer is a cursor value, and like 300 px and like 100 px for height, and then 20 px for border radius. So if I save this and run it, oh, this is probably upset because I don't have anything in here yet. Let me get rid of this. Something's up with my buttons. What am I doing? Mixins, I've got BG color, cursor width, pink pointer. I feel like cursor maybe is, find cursor values. Okay, I'll do help. So I'm not sure that pointer is actually a value. Or help. Oh yeah, I have to actually apply these classes I made. God, I'm so silly. These are all like the silly little things that get you caught up. Like, why is this not working? Oh yeah, I didn't apply this class. Yeah, that's a super useful one, Michael. So now we have this button. And if we style this other one that I pulled out of there, so we can add some other styles in there, right? So if I could do blue and then, is it crosshair, and then the next two were width, height, border radius. Okay, so like 500 px, 50 px, and 10 px. So if I save this and run, now we've got two totally different looking buttons from essentially the same thing, right? This is super powerful, right? This is basically, this is almost code, right? This is like almost some JavaScript stuff where we're just replacing values. Do you guys feel ready to do an example on your own? Cool. So I will drop this in here. Okay. So there's the code. Make your own parametric mixin. I will give you guys, I'll do 7 minutes and 30 seconds because this is a little more abstract than some of the stuff we've done before. So I'll give you 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Set up a parametric mixin. It can be anything, right? So like if you want to change the button one, go for it. If you want to do something for like your A tags or whatever, like whatever you want to do on this page is fine. So just pick something that you want to try to play with and go for it. And then I'll make a thread. So here, thread for links. Put your links inside of that thread so we don't have like 10 pages of people linking their stuff. So I will see you guys in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, guys. I can't tell if my headset was muted or if the timer just didn't make a noise. So sorry about that if it didn't make a noise, but that's time. So post your replies in the channel real quick. We'll take a look at a couple. And there. Jules asks, can a parametric mixin be as simple as colors, background color green, border solid, border color purple? So that's really more of just like a regular mixin, right? If it was parametric, you'd have to have some parameters inside of the paren. Cool, so let's take a look at this one. Let me find the mixin. It's probably at the top. Bordered, centered. Color combo. Cool. Okay, so we've got color combo. Let's find where it's implemented. Cool. So this has been, so this is from Rose. So Rose put it on H tags. So we've got lavender and purple on the H tags, and it is background color and color. Cool. Yeah, this works. So I could just take this and drop it onto whatever, right? So I could drop this onto my P tags and change it to like, this is gonna hurt my eyes, but blue and red. So now we've got the same thing in two different places with just different inputs and outputs, right? This is looking like so 90s, these like little text blocks. Love it. Nice job. So let's find the mixin, find the mixin. This is from Aaron. So he, I can't find the mixin. I'm not sure if maybe you forgot to save because I'm not seeing any A tags. Oh, okay, cool. A tags. So, sorry, do you remember what the name of your mixin is so I can find it? A mixin. Cool. Okay. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Cool. So he's got font size, text decoration color, and hover color. Awesome. Nice job. Really cool. He even added on this little transition effect. That's a nice touch. So you can put in, he can put in whatever values, right? So for none, he's put none in for text decoration, black and forest green. And then there's this 0.3 second transition between the two different colors. Nice job. So if we wanted to drop this onto our other A tags at the footer, they're here to do lime green. It's a really ugly color. It's like super hideous green color that I'm trying to recall. Oh, do you have your, oh, okay. So if you have your actual mixin class inside of the scope of something else, so like if it's embedded in somewhere, then I won't be able to use it somewhere else. So make sure that you've just got it somewhere, not within another set of curlies. So now we've got this and it turns green. Cool. So we can change the hover effect to different colors really easily. Yeah, no worries, man. We learn about scope next week, I believe. So ahead of the curve. So Warren, I think the A tags look different. Let's see. Some layout anchor class. So we've got, yeah, so the nav A, we've changed to Dodger Blue 20 pixel font and no text decoration. Font decoration. This one is text decoration. I believe it's called. I think that's why that's not working. Text decoration. Yeah, text decoration. Cool. So if I run this again, yeah, there we go. So now it's working. So a little syntax error, but easy enough to fix once you realize what's going on. So yeah, awesome job. We can easily swap this in and out and make our A tags look nice. Ooh-wee. Got several examples of a P tag on here. So let's find where the P tag class is. P parameters. So we've got background color and font color to swap in and out. So cool. So yeah, so we've just swapped the colors out on the P tags. Awesome job. If you were a web designer in the 90s, you would be in such high demand. And not sure which mixin this is either. Let's see. We've got six. Oh, it looks like you've changed the border. Cool. So bordered. So we've got padding, border top, and border bottom. Nice. So come down here. So that's our padding, that's our top, and that's our bottom. Awesome. Looks cool. Yeah. So we can change up what the different borders look like really easily. Looks like some questions in the chat. So let me answer these real quick. So I'm going to answer these questions, and then we're going to go on a short break. Scope, block module, and global also taste better than Listerine. Yeah, so there's block scope and global scope and other stuff that we'll get into in the JavaScript segments. But yes, I was referring to that type of scope. Basically, if you have stuff within the same level, it's almost like specificity, where things in the same level and below, you know, you might not have the same access to everything on different levels, basically, within curly brackets. So we'll talk more about that next week, so don't get too caught up on scope yet. I tried calling a mixin missing an argument for its last parameter, and the compiler failed. I was required to give an argument for their parameter in order for it to compile. Is this normal? Yeah, because otherwise it compiles basically to like property, like basically it tries to write this and it's like, oh gosh, what is that? So yeah. I will go over how to get around having to write everything out every time after the break though. So any more questions before you guys go on break? Yeah, these mixins are looking really good, guys. Good job. Yeah, I'm not expecting any, I'm not experiencing any connectivity issues either. Cool. Okay, so I'll give you guys 5 minutes. Go ahead, take a break, get up and stretch, grab a drink, whatever you need to do, and I'll see you back at about 34 or 35 past the hour.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. More than power, never, ever, after work is over. Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Work it harder, make it better, do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. Never over. Work it, make it better, do it faster, makes it stronger. All that effort, power, is never over. Work it, make it better, do it faster, makes it stronger. All that effort, power, work is never over. Work it, faster, makes it stronger. All that effort, power, work it never over. Work it harder, do it faster.
Welcome back, everyone. So, let me get rid of my playlist that's covering my entire screen now. Cool. Okay. So, did anyone have any more questions pop up so far? During the break or whatever? Cool. Looks like we're doing good so far then. So let's talk about a couple more of the fun features of parametric mixins as well. So we can actually set default values for these things as well. So what that means is I can say, if I don't specify a black background color, I want it to just always default to black or yellow or whatever color. So the syntax for that is really easy. On our button parametric mixin, I'll do it with border radius. I'll say I'll say like 50 px. That's like basically a circle, I'm pretty sure. So if I go in here and get rid of this value at the end there, if I save this and run it, that button's now basically a circle, right? It's using this default value of 50 pixels that I gave it. We can prove that by inspecting the frame. And border radius 50 pixels. So again, this is how you declare a default value. And you could do that for all these if you wanted to. Like, there wouldn't really be a purpose to make it parametric if you just use the default values every time. But you could set these default values in case something gets mixed up or there's some issue, maybe a browser doesn't support something that you've written in for one of them or something like that. Help and yellow. So now these all have default values. Save. One. How would you use a parametric mixin with a property that includes commas, e.g. font family? Good question. Let's see. Let me grab like a line from here. Font family. Font family. I'm curious if this will just work dropping it in there like that, or if I have to make it a string. So let's see. Yeah, it looks like you can just drop it in like that. That font looks different. Let me find a cursive. Oh, cursive doesn't have two values. Gosh. Okay. Well, we'll be able to see the difference from this other font, right? So if I do save and run, book a flight. Yeah, it looks like that's not working. Let's see. I don't think I've done one with a font yet. So this will be like a fun experiment for both of us, actually. So I've got font family in there. I bet if I do just like the one thing, it'll, I'm curious if it'll just work with the one value. So it looks like it doesn't even like, unless Georgia is the default value for this in general. Let me like use cursive. Also probably, oh yeah, okay. Oh, okay. So it works if you put the one in there. So I wonder if I can add serif for cursive. That doesn't really look very cursive-y to me, but let me inspect it and see. So it's cursive. Alternate the quotes. Could you do font family with one value and then change the defaults? So it looks like the one value works. So like it's setting it to cursive, but it's not reading the serif. I wonder if I put the whole thing as a string, if it'll read it. I think it was Georgia, right? Georgia serif. Okay. do save and run. Go up a flight. Cool, yeah. Okay, so it looks like you just put it in as a string and it reads it. Interesting. So let me put in this first button, I'll put cursive so we can see the difference. Excuse me. Cursive. Save and run. Inspect. So it's overriding cursive with the default, which is weird. Oh, it's because I erased that other value. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So if I inspect this, we get cursive in the pink one because we specified cursive right here. And then we get Georgia serif in the other one for the default value. So it looks like if you put it in a string, you can specify multiple values in there. Read the rest of these. Could you define a variable as that first, then make the variable the default for the parametric mixin parameters? That is a really hard sentence to understand. The default for the parametric mixin parameters. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask me. I'm sorry. If you want to try to rephrase, maybe. Oh, cool. Thanks for the tip, Michael. Yeah, so the comma actually is just like, if we look at font family, values are separated by commas to indicate there are alternatives. So if Georgia wasn't available, it would go to serif as a backup. Usually you'll do this with fonts that you've imported. So like if you make your own custom font or you import some crazy font from Google Fonts or whatever, if you have that as the first option, then if that crazy font goes down, like if Google Fonts goes down for an hour or something, instead of defaulting to like whatever the browser default font is, it'll go to serif instead, which is a system font, like he said. So that means that like every computer should have that, basically. Every browser should have access to serif. So that's what the comma is. It's not that we're adding like other parameters onto Georgia, it's that we're specifying a backup. Instead of a string, could you make @color Georgia serif and then use @color as your default? Oh, cool. So let's try that. Let's do @font. Georgia serif. Oops. Yep. So if we inspect here, we get Georgia serif. Sweet. So you can, in fact, use other variables in here too. So again, that gets really useful, right? Like if we have our default colors set up, we can just drop those in there. If we have a specific, small font, large font, whatever font sizes, we can just drop those in there. What about not in string? Oops. Serif. Yeah, looks like the string isn't necessary. Yeah. Yep, Warren, hopefully I answered that question. So yeah, you can make a variable and drop it in as the value for the defaults. So that's really cool and a really awesome feature. So anyone have any more questions so far about parametric mixins? We're like a little bit of ahead of schedule, so I could do some more noodling around with one, or we can just move on and spend the time on other stuff. Up to y'all, really. I'm like here at your at your pleasure, pretty much. So if you want to see more examples, we'll do more examples, or we can just go on. Okay, a couple people want to see examples, so I'll do one more little example and then we'll move on. I promise imports doesn't really take a ton of time, so like it'll be pretty quick. So I'll do one for the A tags. So let me find the A tags. Well, actually, yeah, I'll just do like right here. A tag p mixin. And I'll do background color, PG color, color, oops, color, at color, and text decoration, T decoration. I guess that's really about it for any tag, right? Then we just put these values in here. Make sure that they match up and they're in the same order and they're spelled the same way. T decoration. And then we can just grab this. Grabbing the whole thing here is useful because then you can just like refill over these things. So you can like remember what they are. Let's give them some default values too. So blue, blue, white, and none. So my A tags do. So if we give it nothing right here, it'll just take the default values. So they'll look like this. Very, very handsome A tags. If we actually give it some values, we'll do yellow, pink. These are like going to be the prettiest A tags ever. What's a really weird text decoration? Text decoration. We'll do wavy, green wavy underline. That sounds exciting. Wow, very fancy. We can drop it onto the other nav as well. Hey, don't make fun of my A tags, okay? They're trying their hardest, man. Oops. And then we'll drop it onto here and change it up. So this one will be red, black. Actually, I'll do the black background and the red text so we can look extra chiller-esque. And we'll give it this, whatever this looks like. Cool. So we've got like the Twilight fan page nav, and we've got like a flower gardening business nav. Cool. So I'll share this with you guys so you can take a look at it now if you want to. We're going to do a little bit more work in here. So yeah, I didn't realize text declaration was so diverse, honestly. So that's cool. You can put all kinds of weird stuff in there. One more thing that I'll show you guys inside of the text document here, not text document, the code pen, is called escaping. So escaping is basically just another kind of similar to variables thing. So escaping, basically we just use interpolation to replace a string value. Does anyone remember what interpolation is? I brought it up when I was explaining variables the other day. Mapping, yeah, that's a good way of phrasing it. Substitution, yeah, those are good phrases. So yeah, just basically giving something, giving a placeholder some value to hold the place of. So basically we can make a variable to hold a string in and drop it in. The main place we use it generally is for media queries. So we can do, we can actually replace the media tag and real quick do, and keep in mind, I'm just doing it right here to show you, like good convention would say put all your variables and stuff in the same place, usually at the top, but I'm just doing it so we can see it right here next to a media query. So we can do, we'll name it at, what is this, like tablet, at tablet. So we do the grave symbol, it's next to the 1 on your keyboard, on a standard keyboard. Yeah, like shift 1. And then we can actually drop this whole thing in here. And then literally just replace. So our book flight button should get smaller, I guess, at this media query. Yeah. So let me actually change the background color so we can see red. So go. Not sure that it likes it. Maybe let me take the color off of, yeah, let me take background color off of there. Actually, I'll take the background color. I'll change to the text color. So I'll just do color. Make sure that I don't have to refresh for whatever reason. This is interesting. So see, it's fun to like debug in front of you guys because I'm sure I've made some silly like I've like copied it in wrong or something. I don't need the white space. I don't think the white space in a string would cause anything like that to happen, but check and see, I guess. Nope. So we've got, oh, I know why. Because I didn't change the class. I'm like really good at this. Oh my gosh. I've done this now twice in front of you guys. I'm the worst. It's okay. It's still not going, so that wasn't even it. So I've made 2 mistakes now. So let's do, where did I put the tablet? Okay, tablet right there. So we've got tablet, we've got phone. Oh, I think they've actually changed the syntax of this. I don't think that you have to actually put it as a string anymore. Let me see if this fixes it. Okay, that's not it either, but this is a good point that I forgot about, actually. So the syntax, either of these will probably work for a while. This is the old way, but this is the new way. So they changed the syntax slightly. So let me see. One sec, guys. I've got myself turned around here. Okay. We save and run. Okay, there we go. Yeah, it had the class in there. It didn't like the class in there, so totally random. This is how it was set up, so it's kind of weird that it's set up that way. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, all we need to do is replace that whole thing right there. We just drop in the extra variable, basically, and we can replace this whole string. Let me see if this syntax is actually working yet, because it was a proposed change last time I read, so I'm not sure if it's actually implemented yet. It looks like it is. So either of these syntaxes works now, I guess. So use whichever one you like better. This is the newer one, this one that I have uncommented right now. So I would try to use this one because they'll probably at some point get rid of this syntax. So it's better to practice with the newer stuff. Let me see. Yeah. So what else would we use escaping for other than media queries? I'll be honest with you. I've only used it for media queries. It's kind of a super niche thing. It's just nice to like not have to type this stupid thing out like 50 times. And you can have, you can have multiple of them, right? So like I could have phone for my 400 pixel one and just drop phone in. So if I save and run, and make this smaller, now it's green. Cool. So the cool thing about this is you'll often find during actual development that your breakpoints will change a lot. Like when you start the project, they'll be like, okay, I want you to have media queries at 515 pixels, 400 pixels, 980 pixels, and so on and so on. And then halfway through, they'll get rid of like the 980 breakpoint and they'll change it to 940 or something like that. So it makes it a lot easier if you've got all your little variables in one spot. So you can just change this to like 500 instead or whatever. And it's changed all across your project now, right? You don't have to go and edit the max width in every single little thing. You just do it all in one spot. Are there naming conventions, or do we just do what we're comfy with? There are no naming conventions. I would recommend that you name them based on whatever device you're targeting. So like tablet, mobile, desktop, whatever. If you're targeting actual like discrete devices like the iPhone, iPhone 6, for example, maybe do like iPhone 6 or whatever. So like whatever makes sense to you, right? Any more questions on escaping? There's not really much more to it than this. Yeah, this is the only example of it I've ever really seen is with media queries. A couple of people typing, so I'll give folks a minute. Yeah, definitely, Roberto. So in essence, we're creating our own strings that could be used to more accurately describe those media queries. Yeah, pretty much. Like we're just making variables and we're interpolating this value with them. So we just drop it in right here, right? So like we drop our tablet variable in there, and it's interpolating. It actually compiles to say max width 515 pixels or whatever. So really, that's all we're doing. We're just using the name that makes sense to us for the variable. I'm sorry, what is the difference between normal variable and the escape? Just multiple words. Yeah, pretty much. So escaping you'll generally use for strings. I guess it's kind of less relevant now that they got rid of this this older syntax. So it used to be a very different syntax, right? Like you would have to know that this syntax existed to escape properly. But now that this exists, it really is basically just an actual variable now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, yeah. Rose says feels like a fancy variable. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, it was mostly the syntax difference in the past, but now that's less of a thing. So it really is less of an emphasis, I guess, on the difference between a variable and escaping. So you don't use the tilde and quotes anymore. You can, like this will still work, but this is newer syntax. So I would recommend to use this style. Cool. Any more questions on escaping or parametric variable or parametric mixins or any of this stuff? We're going to move on to import statements. Let me open up import statements. Is there still value in knowing the deprecated forms of these? Yeah, definitely. Like that's the reason that we show you some of this older syntax, like the box model, or well, you still use the box model all the time, but like some of this older stuff that you don't use necessarily all the time, because you'll still see it. Like if someone was escaping, 2 years ago or even 1 year ago, it would have looked like this. So if you see this and you have no idea what it is, then you're gonna have to research it a little bit to figure out what's going on. So yeah, there is definitely value in knowing the older stuff. Yeah, exactly, Roberto. If you're refactoring old code or just working in an older code base in general. That's a good point too, Dennis. You could drop multiple variables in there. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Let me find. There's a imports project that I am trying to pull up. Give me 1 sec. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's actually in the training kit, I believe. Is the new syntax supported by all browsers? Yeah, Bradley says the browser doesn't interpret it, the less compiler does. So it doesn't matter what browser. I think that this example file that I used before doesn't seem to exist anymore. So that's unfortunate. I guess let me pull up, one sec. I'm gonna grab my version of this down onto my computer. So this is actually y'all's assignment for tonight. So it'll be good for you to see it anyway. Let me get my git bash. Oops. Git. Nick says the cascade matters. Yes, you'll see that here in just one moment. So this is actually y'all's assignment for tonight. This is one that I did like several thousand years ago, it feels like. First we'll take a look here. So you'll notice that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 less files in here. So I mentioned that we can split out our less files, and I wasn't joking, right? So we've got our variables, it's the order of variables, mixins, reset, global, nav, footer, homepage. Global, nav, footer, homepage. Okay. Is the fun bus assignment actually fun? Debatable, I suppose, but I thought it was fun, so. Cool. So basically, we have this index.less file that kind of acts as the container for all the rest of the files. So this is literally just a file that imports all the other files, right? And Nick said the cascade matters, and he is totally right. So we have these in a very specific order. Can anyone think of why they might be in the order that they're in? Cascading. Right, exactly. The reset would take over everything. So we actually put the variables and the mixins up here first so that basically everything has access to them, right? So like they're loaded in, they're available, and all these other things can use them. Yeah, exactly, Stephen. So these guys are ready and usable. Then the reset comes, and we wouldn't want to put the reset down somewhere like here, right? Because that would overwrite a bunch of other styles. So actually, let me show you. One sec. Let me turn my compiler on. Compiler. Okay, here we go. Cool. So if I pull this over here and pull this over here and drop this guy in here, if I do, let's see, if I move this down here, refresh, everything looks way different now, right? So I dropped the reset down below the navigation and the global styles. So what that does is it probably overwrote half my global styles and half my nav styles. You notice the font changed, the size changed, this thing changed, all sorts of stuff changed. So that's just to demonstrate that the cascade is real, so to speak. And then we've got our variables in here too. So this is that color convention I was talking about. We've got I actually assigned those color sub variables to font color, button background, main background, nav border, footer background. So that is in practice how you might do that. The bus is no longer fun. So these are media calls. These are all my variables, so they're loaded in and ready. And then my mixins use some of those variables. And then we get down to the reset. And we get our reset. We get our global stuff. And then we get our nav. Everything's nested in here. So this is kind of the more, the less that we've been seeing a little bit more now. We've got our media calls embedded in there. I've got some empty ones in here, like don't do that. It's just wasted space. And we've got the footer. So, oh, and then homepage too. So all this is really doing is basically, if I copy pasted all this stuff into my index.less file, so like if I did this essentially, like if I just went through, grabbed everything, dropped it in order, and so on and so forth. Like I'm not gonna actually grab all of them, but if I just kept doing this, that's pretty much what you guys are doing right now, right? So what this does is it just organizes that process and allows us to be more discrete in our code. It allows us to break it up into chunks, which makes it a lot easier for us to like understand. So like looking at this little page of variables is way nicer than finding a chunk of variables in like an 8,000 line file. And then same with the mixins, like all the mixins are right here. They're easy to see. I don't have to worry about them. The reset is just its own thing. You copy paste it in there and let it go. And then you actually do your styles in these other discrete pages. So this is really just an organizational tool. It makes your life way easier and kind of takes a lot of the headache of the cascade out of it for you, right? So like you're just worrying about one section at a time. You're not overlapping stuff unless you're accidentally using the same class in different parts. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If you use the same class in different files, you might overwrite things. So like if I had nav container also in my footer, that might cause some overwriting of stuff, for example. In Josh's tutorial video, he didn't include the less slash. Is that just preference? Yeah, it's where the stuff exists. So he probably just had everything in one root file together. The way that this project is set up, it has this less file. So what this is saying is go from the root of the project, find the less file, and then find the variables file, or the less folder rather, and then find the variables file. That's all that is. It's just a direct path from the root of the project. Is your reset file just a normal reset, or is it in a less format? Nope, it's just a normal one. I just grabbed the Eric Meyer one. Literally just copy paste it, drop it in there. I'm glad you enjoy this, Roberto. I do too. Like this makes CSS way more palatable for me. Let me get rid of this. Cool. True, but then we have a bunch of less files. Is that okay? Yeah, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 less files because y'all are the only ones that will see them, right? The developer is the only group that will see the less files because it all gets compiled to CSS on the way to the browser. So it doesn't affect your load times or anything like that. So any questions so far on this process? So I haven't touched the style of my H1 to 5 tags, but when I use them in my HTML, they just default to 14 pixel plain. So that's probably your reset. So your reset has H1 to H5 tags in here. So there's a default style in your reset. There's also a default style in the browser as well. So if I right click and inspect this, if I scroll all the way down, wherever it says user agent style sheet, that's a default browser setting. So for a p tag in Google Chrome, these are the default settings. So that could explain why. Why do you not have to say the file extension in your less container file? Yeah, this is just a thing, I guess. Like you don't have to put you don't generally have to put the file extension. Like if you have like a PNG or something, you usually don't have to. The only reason I could think of why you would have to specify is if you had two files named the same thing but of different file types, which would be a terrible idea anyway, so I don't recommend doing that. Charlie, yeah, if you want to overwrite whatever the default is, then you'll have to give it a value. Because it's just like when we gave the default values in the parametric mixin. You have to give it a specific value. Yeah, exactly. Just for more control. So just again, the real main purpose of this whole thing is just organizational. Just splits it out. It's easier for developers to deal with. It also makes it easier to work in teams because I could be setting up the variables and mixins while someone is setting up some global styles or styling the footer or whatever. Like we could all be working in separate less files and not have to worry about overwriting each other's stuff. In VS Code, you can right-click on the file in the left panel and allow you to copy the relative path. Yeah, so you can go here and copy relative path, and that's what it is. It does the back slant for some reason, but yeah. I asked when we started CSS if it's a good practice to have multiple CSS files, and you guys said it's not and that it affects the browser's load time. I don't get why having multiple less files doesn't affect the load time. So the reason is these are all less files. So the browser has no interaction with the less files. All this does is basically when it's compiled, the compiler looks into your index.less. And essentially what it does is it takes all the stuff from variables, it looks at that, and then it takes all the stuff from mixins, and then it looks at that, and then it looks at reset, then it looks at global, then it looks at navigation, then footer, then homepage. And then it basically copy pastes all that stuff into a CSS sheet and sends that to the browser. After reformatting all this stuff into CSS. So, it depends on how much stuff you have in your less files. Like if you have like 50,000 lines of less, then maybe it'll take a second to compile to CSS. I'm not sure of the optimization on that, but you're still only sending one CSS file to the browser. It's not getting sent multiple pages that it has to load separately. It's just got the one thing that it has to worry about. So that's why it doesn't matter. Is it good practice to name your less container index.less? Yeah, that's a standard naming convention. Cool. So rest of the class, I guess I'll just intro the project. If anyone has questions, ask and I'll answer them as we go. Why are there two less folders, less and index.less? Index.less is not a folder, it's a file. It's a file within the less folder. So this is just like, think of this as like a container class for your less, basically. Like remember we have our .container class that we usually put to like center our page and make it look nice. Think of that, think of index.less as that for your less files. It just gets everything all in one spot and makes it look nice. No worries. Couple people typing. So I'll just pull up these instructions and start talking while y'all are asking your questions. So the project tonight is called Funbus. So we get a design file. We actually get two design files, the desktop and the mobile. So desktop looks like this, and mobile looks like this. So a little bit of a challenging jump for y'all. The mobile looks pretty different. So first things first, get your project set up with Git, same flow that we've been using. Set up your preprocessor, get everything running. I think that I heard that a lot of you guys had issues getting the preprocessor started. So just remember that before you start coding, you have to drop that. You have to drop the phrase into your terminal to get it going. So right there. You just have to drop that phrase in, and your compiler will start running. And whenever you save, it should put something like that out. And all that means is that it understood that you saved it and it's recompiling. Is there an optimal image size to import? No, not really. It depends on what you're using it for. So like marketing people and like digital design people have tools that will make, basically like you can have like a X pixel by X pixel image, and they can somehow compress it to make it take up less space. I have no idea how that works, but generally you'll be working with someone who specializes in like visual design, and that'll probably be more their thing to worry about. But in the event that it isn't, it really just depends on how your page is loading. So like, I'm sure you guys have seen websites before where like you look where you go there and the images all take like 5 seconds to load, and it's like type thing. So that means that their image is way too big or way too high of a resolution for their server to handle. Pretty much, like you're not loading it fast enough. So you could cut. Basically, it depends on how it's performing, really. Like if you notice a significant delay in the loading, you might make it smaller. But yeah, generally you want it to be as high resolution as you can without having like a significant delay on it. Yeah, so get your preprocessor running. Do something silly just to see that it's running. So like change like a letter or something and save it and see that it prints out something like that. And then you're going to set up your import less files. So basically you're just going to do this literally in this order. Like don't change the order. We want them in this order. So all you have to do is set up the @import tag and pretty much just like drop that in there pretty much. And then do your desktop design. So you'll do desktop first. And make sure that you're separating out your actual styles. So we do not want to see all of your stuff in the index.ls file. Do not style in here. Like there shouldn't be nothing in here other than these import statements. Yeah, so like if we see like classes in here or whatever, then you misunderstood the instructions. So like if I see this, I would be sad. So basically just keep everything in the file that it should be in. So all of your navigation styles should be in the navigation.ls file. All of your footer styles should be in the footer.ls file. Make sense? And then pretty much just do that with mobile as well. So you can have your media queries in there as well. So that's fine. See. Yep, so that's pretty much it. Just get your less properly imported, your compiler running, and then do this desktop and mobile design. And I said before, but your sprint challenge for this week is very similar to this. Dealing with the compiler, getting your imports set up, and just doing some styling with media queries as well. So if you do well on this project, it should be a confidence booster for the sprint challenge. So definitely apply yourselves. Why can't we change the order? Because the cascade. So remember, if I come in here and I comment out my global styles, for example, if I look in here, Now all my global styles are gone and my sheet is ugly. If I comment it back in, and it looks pretty again, but then if I take my global styles and move it like up here above the reset, then it's weird again because the reset is overriding some of my global styles. Yeah, so basically it's just in a way that makes sense, right? So we want all this stuff that would overwrite or that needs to be accessed or is just like nice to have all in one place. So we've got our variables, our mixins, and then our reset. Think of that as just like stuff that we need to get the project set up. So it comes first. And then our global styles, because those are ones that will be on multiple pages, probably. Like if you had the About Us, blog, and contact pages on here, then those global styles will probably be used all across those pages. Then your nav and footer, because those are also essentially global for the most part, because you'll probably have a nav and a footer on every page. And then we have our specific page styles, which is the least or the most specific, because we're only using it on this one page. So that's why we have it set up in this order. Try to add a small commit. What does this mean? Warning, LF will be replaced by CRLF and CSS index.css. So that's just a computer difference thing. So what that means is that you're on a Windows computer and this file was made on either a Mac or a Linux system. So it's just like a difference in the way that your formatting is set up, basically. Yeah, so don't worry about it. I always just click yes to that. Cool, okay. Any more questions on this stuff, guys? We're about at time, so I will let you fly free. All right, I'll drop this in the chat one more time so you guys can play around with it. And I will see you after your sprint challenge next Tuesday. Very fun. See you guys. Have an awesome night.